Over the past several videos, I've shown you a bit about how to customize Matlab plots in terms of changing the colors of the lines and the thickness of the lines and the markers and so on. But now it's time to learn how to really customize your Matlab graphics using the get and set functions. Let's start by just plotting a few lines. So I'm going to run this plot command. It's not doing anything terribly interesting. It's just plotting a few lines here. So what I'm going to do is activate the figures. So that gives me the figure menu bar. And then I click on figure. And then we are looking for an option called show plot tools, which, where is it again? I believe it's, oh yeah, sorry, it's called property inspector. If you are using an older version of Matlab, it used to be called Show Plot Tools. Here it's called Property Inspector. So that opens up this other little window here, and this gives you information about lots of features of this figure, including, for example, the font weight. So now I can click on this, and that made all the fonts here bold. And then the font size, I can set this to, how about 20? And now the font gets really big. And there's all sorts of things that you can change. So here is something about the ticks. So this is the X tick. This shows us the X tick. It says 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. So what I'm going to do now is just delete the 8. And now the 8 is gone from here. So there's all sorts of things that you can modify here. This one says the X, so this is in a section for rulers. The X limit is from 0 to 10. And I'll make this 0 to 15. So now the X limit got larger. Many things that you can modify here. And furthermore, so this is changing features of this axis, which is in this figure. And we can also change some features of the line. So for example, now I've selected here from this top menu, the axis and then the line, and I selected this kind of reddish, orangish line. So now I'm going to change the color to, how about this pink color, and let's make it a thicker line. So instead of 0.5, I'll make it 9. All right, so there you go. You can also click directly on the figure here. So now I click on the axis here. So I just clicked on the y-axis, and that brings me directly to the option to change the y-axis. So I can change the scale from, let's see, the y-axis scale to go from linear to logarithmic. So this is just to give you a sense. Now, the thing is that when you change features of a figure like this is not permanent. As soon as you close this figure, all of these features are undone. And furthermore, if you want to replicate this way of modifying the x-axis and the limits and the y-axis scale and the plots and so on, it's really tedious, and in fact, it's a terrible idea to use this property inspector to change these features of the graphs manually. I just want to show you that this thing exists. A much better way to do this is to use the function set. So I've already used this function set previously in this section, but now I want to talk about it in more depth. So set is a function that allows you to change the properties of certain graphics objects. And the way that the set command works is you first input a pointer to the object that you want to modify, and then you input pairs of inputs. And these are always called property value pairs. So it always goes the property that you want to change, and then the thing that you want to change it to. So GCA stands for Get Current Axis. The current axis is whatever axis you most recently drew data to, or whatever you most recently clicked on. So you can mouse click on this axis, and that becomes the axis that we will modify. So here you see the property value pair. So I want to change the X tick to go from 1 skip 2 up to 9. So notice that here it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And now here, after running that line of code, it's 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Okay, and this next line here is to show you that you can set multiple property value pairs in the same set command. So we are going to set the current axis. We're going to change something about the current axis. We change the X tick to 1 through 9, just like we do up here. And then I'm changing the xtick label to a cell array that says 13579 in quotes, or in as characters, as text. So we can run that. And now we see that the xtick labels are the words 13579, just as we've specified here. Okay, so now how do you know what features of an axis or a graph or a line you can change? How do you know which properties there are? That you can do with the get function. So if you just write get current axis, get GCA, that gives you a long list of, this is a structure, it gives you a really long list. Look at all these properties that you can change. So you see on the left is the name of the property, and then on the right is the value of that property. So now we see there is a property called font size, and it's currently set to 10. So even just to show you this, I'm going to write get current axis font size. Now notice with get, you don't need a property value pair because you are getting the value. You input the property and that returns the value. So now I'm going to write, let's set this to be 20. And now we no longer want to get this, we want to set this. So I wrote set get current axis font size 20, and that changes the font size. Now the font is much bigger. And now if I write get current axis font size again, the new value is 20. It used to be 10, that was the default value, and now it's 20 because that is what I set it to. All right, you can also specify outputs for get. So here we are saying get current axis ylim, and set that equal to a variable called axis ylim. So now I have this axis ylim. It's a 2-element vector, and it's telling me that the limit of the y-axis goes from 0 to 1, and here you see it goes 0 and 1. And also, just to make sure this is super duper clear, I'm going to write set get current axis ylim. How about we go from like -1 to pi? Why not that? Okay, so now that's changed here, and I'm going to run this line again, and now we get that the new value of axis ylim is -1 and pi. All right, so here I want to show you how to use the get current axis with multiple subplots. So this is just it's just random data. It's nothing terribly interesting. Mostly I just want to illustrate how to get GCA to work with different subplots. So now the current active axis is the one that was most recently mouse clicked or the one that was most recently called and drawn to. So when I change the x-axis limits from -4 to 15, that's going to affect this plot over here. Okay, it doesn't change this plot. Every time you call set and get current axis, it's only going to affect this plot. If you want to affect this plot, you can click here. So I just clicked with my mouse on this axis, and now I run this line of code again, and that affects this plot and not this one, because now this is the active one. There are ways to specify any arbitrary axis that you want to modify by using pointers, and I will show you that in a few moments. First, I want to show you something else. So this was changing the current axis, and now we have set get current figure. The idea is exactly the same. The principle is exactly the same. The only difference is that it's affecting the entire figure rather than an axis in the figure. And so there's also different properties. So we can write get current figure, and I'm not going to scroll all the way up to compare this against the current axis, but you can see that these are different properties. So let's change some of these properties just to give you a little bit of a taste. So I'm going to change the color to, these are RGB codes that range from 0 to 1. So the color is going to change. The name is going to change. So here the name is figure 1. In fact, let's even do that. Let's say get current figure and then name. So actually the current name is set to nothing. And then we have number title, and I'm going to toggle that to be off. So let's see what happens when I run this line of code. So now we changed the color of the entire figure to purple. Notice that doesn't change the axes. I'm not changing the axis color. I'm changing the figure color. And then here's the name, my purple figure, and the number title. Toggling number title off just removes the, it used to say figure 1 over here. So we got rid of that. Okay, so far I've shown you how to use get and set for axes and figures. Now I want to show you that you can also set and get property information from objects within axes. So for example, let me get rid of this purple figure. It's a little bit distracting. So I'm going to open up a new figure here. So we say title, and this opens up an empty axis because we haven't plotted anything, but we have a title here. So how can you go about changing this title? Well, the thing is, this bit of text here, it's not part of the figure and it's not part of the axis. It is its own little object. So I am going to get the object, the property title from getCurrentAxis. And this actually returns a handle. A handle is like a pointer. So when you are working with plot objects and you're going to use get and set, and you have access to these handles, you set up variables to handles, it's common to end the variable name in h. That's similar to when you're creating a loop, and the looping index variable often ends in I. So now we can see all of this information about the text handle. Okay, so we can type get title handle that I just showed you here, and now I can set the handle to have a font size of 40, it's really big, and I can change the string to, so it currently says hello there, and now I'm going to change it to large title because it is a large title. Okay, so you can get handles to all sorts of objects inside the figure. So I showed you the title, and now I'm going to show you plot. So let's see. Here we are doing some plotting. We just generate a couple of lines here. Here I'm requesting an output from the plot function, and this output is going to be a line handle. Also notice that I'm using getCurrentAxis ylim as an input directly into the plot function for the y-axis coordinates. So here we have this handle to this specific line here. So you can see it's a line that goes on the x-axis from 6 to 6, and on the y-axis it goes from the y-axis limit, and now actually the y-axis limit changed as soon as it plotted this, but this was the previous y-axis limit. Okay, so now we see all the information, or a lot of information, about that line. So there's the color, the line style, the line width, and so on. And now we can directly change these. So I can change, so I'm saying set line handle, and then I'm changing the line style to be dashed, the line width to be 2, and the color to be black. So this is going to affect this purple line right here. All right, so there you go. We changed the line. Notice that these are also, these are overlapping with the kinds of properties that we can specify by providing an extra input into the plot function. So I could have written line width 2 like this. Sometimes that's more convenient. Sometimes this is more convenient. There's a lot that you can do with handles to plot objects, but I hope this gives you a brief introduction. So in this video, I introduce you to the functions get and set. Get is for viewing or extracting properties of graphics and graphics objects, and set is the function you use to change those properties.